Karen and Tobi, thank you so much for sitting down here with me today. We are here to talk about a crisis that's happening in Canada, one that I hope all Jesus followers will want to know more about. And that is the crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and Two-Spirit people. But before we get started, why don't you tell us who you are?
Danse, Karen Itzikason, Katavim Satonda Sinimak. Hi, my name is Karen, and I'm Métis. I grew up in northern Alberta. I've been married to Howard Jolly for 32 years. We were pastoring a church here in Winnipeg, First Nations Alliance Church, and now he's started a new position with a national office. He's the director of First Nations Alliance Churches of Canada. Our heart and our passion is to work with Indigenous people.
And I'm Tobi Jolly. I'm their daughter. I am a Cree person. I'm from northern Alberta and Quebec and Ontario. I live here in Winnipeg as a guest on Treaty 1 territory. I'm a social worker. I work as the Family Information Liaison Unit worker, or the FILU worker, in southern Manitoba. And I have counterparts in every province and territory, as well as one who works with northern Manitoba, working specifically with families of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls in Canada.
Thank you for that. And so before we really dive into this issue, I'm learning lots about Indigenous people in our country, and I know that many other Canadians are trying to learn things as well. Can you share with us, though, to start out with, some of the things that make up the heart of who Indigenous people and communities are? What do you value? What are the things that are important to you?
So I think there's an important distinction to make, first of all, that Indigenous people in Canada refers to quite a vast array of different groups. So generally it's First Nations people, Métis people, and Inuit people, all of which have distinct communities and nations that have their own values, their own cultures, their own specific ways of living. So we can't speak to those. Certainly we can speak to our own. And we haven't been asked to represent anybody here. We're just here to talk from our own experience working in the roles that we've worked in, and then being Indigenous women ourselves. So we're just talking as Tobi and Karen Jolly, not so much as Indigenous women.
The thing that I would say about Indigenous people, family connection is really important, and that's been part of our heritage for many years. And also community. Community was a very an important place to be, because you knew that you belonged there. But also the connection to land is vital for us. We find security, we find peace, we find sustenance on the land. And so that's a big part of who we are. And that those three things I value myself as an Indigenous woman. I value those three things with our people.
Water has a lot of symbolism to Indigenous people, specifically to women. Water is considered a life-giving source. It's what brings life into your community. Women are what bring life into the community. We carry life, we carry children into our community, bringing up the next generation. So for ceremonies, women are the ones who carry water. We carry pails of water into the sweat lodges, into any other water ceremonies, because women are considered powerful enough to carry life-giving forces, so they carry that responsibility.
So you mentioned, Karen, about the connection of family and community to the land and how important that is. I can't imagine the grief and the heaviness that families and communities are carrying with the loss of family members, with the loss of their daughters, with their loss of their sisters, their wives, their mums. And all across Canada, we're seeing this happen, this horrible tragedy. And in fact, there are hundreds of unsolved cases of missing and murdered Indigenous women in Canada. spanning decades. And tragically, this is just a difficult statistic to talk about, Indigenous women are 12 times more likely to be murdered than non-Indigenous women. But you know, it's a nationwide crisis, but let's start here in Winnipeg. And Tobi, you know more than anybody here what this is like to walk with families that have experienced this. Why don't you start by just telling us a bit about the young girl, Tina Fontaine?
Yeah, so Tina is this huge, what do they call it, a watershed moment for the movement of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and Two-Spirit people here in Manitoba, and I think for Canada at large. Tina was 14 years old when she was murdered. And in the investigation and the inquiry into her death following, they found so many systems that had seen her in the days before her death, child welfare, police, like safe shelter places had seen her and knew all these struggles that she was having. She was being exploited. There were adult men who were exploiting her. So it was widely known that she was not safe, and she still was not protected. She was still not, you know, brought into those safe places and treated with dignity and respect. So her death was just this huge eye-opening moment for people of all the ways the systems were failing Indigenous women and girls and Two-Spirited people. So when she was found, there were so many changes that were made. Her inquiry had all kinds of recommendations for child welfare, for police. There's a safe shelter space here in Winnipeg for youth that's named after her now, Tina's Safe Haven. There is a crisis stabilization unit that was created in the wake of her murder. And then also in her trial, the man who likely was the person who was responsible for her death was found not guilty, despite a lot of evidence. She was found in a river here in Winnipeg. I talked about rivers being a source of life here for Indigenous people, and I think that kind of highlighted how far we've come from that.